All right. Well, welcome everyone today to our Facebook Live event with Miss Kirsten Haglund. We're so honored to have her here. As you know, she's a representative from Timberline, Knolls, and she is here to share with us today living true to our values in eating disorder recovery. And with that, I'd like to introduce Miss Kirsten.
Hey everyone, it's so great to be here. Thank you, Jacqueline, as always. Thank you everyone who's joining us on another one of our Facebook Lives. I just think these are so much fun because we get to hear from you and I get to share a little bit what's on my heart. And so if anyone is watching, tuning in now, welcome. It's great to be here with you, and please feel free to post any of your comments and questions as we kind of go through this. We want to hear from you. That's the whole part of what makes this fun, but also really helpful and meaningful. So today the topic is on living true to our values in eating disorder recovery. And this is, I think, it's actually a really, really challenging topic because when we're going through the process of recovery and treatment, you have to discover what your values actually are. Because so much of the time throughout a struggle, and really throughout any struggle in our lives, whether it's depression or anxiety or a new season or a new challenge, whatever it may be, school, work, personally, we have to take that time to reassess and say, okay, what are my real values? It's also so hard to decipher too, because we are so bombarded by the culture that we grow up in, wherever that is, all over the world. We are bombarded with messages of what our values should be. And it's kind of hard to escape. And a lot of times we're affected by messages subconsciously and we don't even realize it. So before we even dive into how do I stay true to my values, we have to address the question, what are my real values? And one of the things that, I wanted to do was share a little bit about, I obviously have a story of my own and it's very personal and it's just one story, but a time when I really discovered what my true values really were. And so I started to get treatment for my eating disorder when I was 15 years old, and my parents were the ones who really took on the impetus to get me into treatment. And I started working with my doctors. I had a treatment team of providers, a nutritionist, a psychologist, as well as a primary care who specialized in pediatric eating disorders. And for about the first 6 months of these weekly, multiple times a week doctor's appointments, I kind of thought that I could just fool my doctors, con my doctors into, hopefully that they would think that I was kind of working with them and I would maybe gain enough weight to get my period back. And then I would be like, okay, I'm fine. Obviously at that point, I didn't know what was involved in real recovery, but I was very hesitant and very much in denial at first, as many of us are when we first go into treatment. And my values were still the values of the eating disorder. That voice was still very, very, very strong in my head. And I didn't know what mine were. But about 6 months into treatment, into outpatient treatment, I had a moment where I was exercising and, of course, doing so in a very unhealthy way. And I had a real physical scare. Like I almost blacked out when I was running. And I had to step back. I had to sit down so I didn't completely pass out. And it was in this moment of extreme physical vulnerability that, and I was a dancer. I grew up as a dancer. So I was very in tune with my body, very, very in touch with everything it felt, and always felt very in control of my body. But in this moment, I felt completely out of control. And it was from that moment of weakness that just surging from up inside of me. It's very, very difficult to explain, but just from like the pit of my stomach, I all of a sudden had this huge realization that, oh my goodness, I want to live. I want to get married someday. I want to have children. I want to learn another language. I want to eat pizza again at a birthday party. I want to help people. I want to serve. I want to travel the world. All these desires came just like flooding up from inside of my soul. And I don't know where they came from, but all of a sudden I realized all the things that I really wanted and the things that I truly valued, and remembered who I was, a person that I hadn't been in touch with in literally years. In years, I had suffocated that person inside of me. And that was really the turning point for me, in that I realized that I actually did want recovery. I realized in that moment that I couldn't do any of those things that I really wanted to do that were really me when I was still enslaved to my eating disorder. They could not exist together in the same space. And I'd been trying, but in so doing, I had basically killed that former self, my real self, my healthy self. And so that was the time when I really turned around and started to actually engage in my treatment process. And of course, that was not perfect. It was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. It was incredibly long and arduous process. But that was the moment when I realized and I reconnected with what my true values really were, what I wanted in my life, what I valued. And I hung on to that. And of course, our values change, our priorities change in different seasons of our lives and in different times, right? But the most important thing is connecting and finding out and getting back in touch with who you truly are and figuring out what your real values are. And of course, a lot of times we can't do that alone. We need the help of a therapist. We need the help of other resources. I mean, one of the most amazing things about Eating Disorder Hope is, I mean, you have 1,000 articles from clinicians and professionals all over the site that you can read that are unbelievably helpful and helping you to process and to think through, okay, what is really important to me? And a lot of people obviously, of course, need the help of a therapist to process through this, and it can take a long, long time. But it's reconnecting with what you truly value and what you truly cherish, and getting rid of the eating disorder voice and its values, and reconnecting with your own. For me personally, what I truly valued was helping other people and using what I'd been through in my life, whatever challenges that I faced, to help other people. That I valued harmony, that I valued peace. Not only within myself, but among the people around me, that I valued love of family and friends and relationships. And one way that I really worked with my therapist in staying true to my values, especially in cohesion and harmony and my family values, was especially like when I would go to events. I mean, we all know that when we're going through eating disorder recovery, that events or parties or things where food are going to be present are always a real challenge. So one of the most, and I still remember it to this day, my therapist saying to me, focus on the relationships, not the food. And I realized that I'd never really been challenged to go somewhere and actually engage in the conversations with people and figure out how they were doing and ask other people questions and actually focus and be very present in the conversations I had with people, rather than also having an eye on the buffet table or what everyone else was eating, or be self-conscious about what people thought I was eating, right? Focusing on the relationships, not the food. And that was one very tangible, very practical tool that my therapist gave me in order to focus on, which was living true to my values and valuing relationships and the people in front of me, not just my relationship with food. So the first main point is, the only way we're going to be able to live true to our values in recovery is if we find out what they really are to begin with. And that can take a long time. It is a process and they change, but it is completely possible, especially with help and proper treatment and access to care. So first, identify what they are. The second main thing is, once you do what you truly value, what you truly cherish in this world, what you want to do with your life and who you are as a person, how you want to grow, we have to accept that is going to be met with serious challenges from the world. Because I'll never forget when I started living more true to my values and pursuing what I actually wanted to pursue rather than what the eating disorder voice told me, you realize that the whole world is like eating disordered. Like the entire world has an eating disorder. I mean, you see it everywhere, from advertisements to diet, propaganda, to just the way that men and women are presented in the media, to the way that people talk about food and their weight. You see it all over the place. It's bombarding, and you're like, oh my goodness, you want to tell everyone, like, stop, what are you doing to yourself and to the culture and your children? But we have to realize that it's going to be met with severe opposition from the world. And you're entering into a battle. When you choose to truly live authentically, you're going into battle with the world. So expect that. It's not easy. And anyone who has convictions, who has thought through and heartfelt convictions, is going to face a battle in this world. And that also can be very, very challenging, especially when we're new in recovery, because a lot of us are people pleasers. And a lot of us want to, like me, maintain harmony and peace around the people that we love and our family and friends and all that. And that's fine. And that's a worthy goal. But we can never let the pursuit of peace or the pursuit of pleasing others be a detriment to us living true to our values, because we're going to face opposition. So how do we respectfully oppose what the world says we should be and what we should do, and say, okay, I accept that that exists, but I don't have to let that affect me and change me as a person. And that takes practice. But the first thing to do is to be aware and to acknowledge that there's going to be opposition. So we don't think that this is just going to be an easy thing. It's not. Living true to our values too. And I bring this up because I know we're on Facebook right now, but so much of our life is lived online nowadays. It just is the way of it. And it's only going to get more. One of the most impactful ways for not only ourselves, but then for others too, and how we make a difference in other people's lives, is how do I live true to my values on social media? And that's a question we should constantly be asking ourselves. Not only in the way that we encourage or post or comment on other people's posts or videos or photos, but how do I live an authentic life on social media? Meaning that I don't just post highlight reel of my entire life. I'm constantly trying to encourage people to be real on social media. And what's interesting, and that takes courage. That really takes courage. For example, this just happened to me earlier today. I recently just moved. I'm living abroad right now. I'm in Switzerland. Hello from Switzerland. So it's 11 p.m. here. But so I've been, tweeting and Instagramming all about my experience here. And it's just been so fun to compare the cultural differences and also the things which are exactly the same, which is so fascinating. You think that you're going to move to another culture and everything's going to be so different. And some things are just, people struggle with some of the same things all over the globe, which is comforting. But I've been tweeting about some of my experiences, and both the good and the bad, right? So I've had some really wonderful things and then some other things where I'm like, oh, this stinks. For example, yesterday I missed the train, and Swiss trains run notoriously on time. Well, my train actually came early, like a couple minutes early. I missed the train and I watched it pull away, and it was so frustrating. Like, I had planned it perfectly. I was going to be on time and the train pulled away. And I was like, that is not fair. Like, this is not fair for the train to come early, right? So anyway, today I got a message in my Twitter notifications of some random person. I don't know who they were, but it was like, you seem to be so negative about your experiences. Like, can't you just learn to embrace the differences? And, she sent a couple tweets like yelling at me basically. And I got so mad because I went back through my Twitter feed. I'm thinking, no, I posted a bunch of positive stuff. And then I also posted like when I was frustrated about something. And that was me trying to be authentic and real, because not everything is great all the time, And immediately my self-criticism went in and be like, oh, you need to post all positive stuff. And you don't want people to think that you're having a bad time. You don't want people to think that like things are wrong and everything. I'm like, wait a minute. No, why am I going to let one anonymous person dictate? And I was like also wanting to maybe type back to her and be like, did you see all of my positive posts? But it's just so not worth it, and that really showed me, I was like, wow, this is such wonderful preparation for this Facebook Live, because being authentic on social media, especially when we share, comes with a risk that people are going to misinterpret, or they're not going to like what you said, or, whatever. But at least you're being authentic and real to who you are. And I can put my head down on my pillow at night when I go to sleep and know that I was being real. And I know that there are tons of people out there who love and appreciate the fact that you share both good and bad things, and struggles as well as triumphs. So not only in the way that you respond to other people, but also in the way that you post, be real. Be real. It pays enormous dividends. And even though you might get a lot of people who applaud you for being real and encourage you if you post something like, hey, I'm having a hard day and this is where I need encouragement, there will be countless other people that see what you write and what you post and how you behave, who will be touched by it, but never post anything or never say anything. Social media has this incredible power, and yes, it can be a tool used for great evil, but at the same time, it can be a tool used for great good. And you never know whose life you're impacting by living true to your values on social media. This is tremendous power that we each have in our hands. And so I always really encourage, since that's the way you're going to see and interact with people that maybe you haven't seen in years or will never see for many more years, this is a way to positively impact them. So live true to your values and be real and spread your light there. The last thing that I want to say about this, and in contemplating talking about this subject, I really realized that when we're not living true to our values, basically we're living out of a place of fear. And when I thought about being in the depths of my eating disorder, so much of it was about being afraid and responding to fear. Fear of gaining weight, fear of not pleasing others, fear of being a disappointment, fear of not measuring up. It is an entire construct based on fear. And what does it mean to live without fear? And sometimes that's impossible. But how can we constantly and consistently challenge ourselves to say, what am I afraid of right now? If I'm not living truly and authentically, if I'm not going after what I really want, if I'm not being true to myself, what am I afraid of? And taking the time to meditate and process through that and praying about it and bringing it to God. Because if we're not living true to ourselves, we're living a life that's restricted. And we all know that restriction does not lead to good things. So to kind of recap, first, it's important to find out what your values truly are. Second, don't look for confirmation from the world. Expect that your values are going to be radical. They're going to be countercultural, and take pride in that and find the strength in that, because it's beautiful and it will inspire others. The third thing, ask yourself, how do I live true to my values on social media, which will inspire other people to live true to theirs as well. And then the fourth is to ask yourself, if I'm not living true to my values, what am I afraid of? And as soon as you confront that fear, it's so much easier to overcome. But as long as that fear remains unspoken, it will continue to have power in your life. So recognize the fear and surrender it. And that leads to true freedom. And before we get to your questions, and I hope that you guys have, or that this has spurned some good reflection for those of you that are listening and are watching, just want to say that this is a process that occurs over a lifetime. The time that we're in treatment or in recovery from an eating disorder is a very special and very unique time. And we learn so much and we gain so many skills in the process. But also, whatever age you are when you first go into treatment, there are numerous challenges and seasons of life that face you later on. And they're going to bring up new challenges and new questions and new times to reassess, okay, what truly are my values? And it's so important to continue to reassess that as challenges arise in our lives, because our values change and we grow as people, and that's okay. But just constantly taking that reassessment and checking back in with yourself is so incredibly important, because that's the only way that we can truly live not from a place of fear, but honestly from a place of hope and a place of truth, even when it's scary. So that's that.
So it's so cool while you're talking. Zoom and Facebook have grown, and there's all these cute hearts and thumbs up floating up the screen. I don't know if you've seen them.
Good.
People are really liking what you're saying. It's right on the money. We do have a couple of comments for you.
Yeah.
One was comments and questions. One was saying there's just so many appointments, and I'm 37 years old, and I'm committed to not getting overwhelmed and to live. Can you give her any commiseration?
And I'm not getting overwhelmed in what was that last part?
So many appointments that that she wants to live. She doesn't want to feel overwhelmed by the amount of appointments that she's going to right now in her recovery journey.
Yeah. Yeah. It's rough. It's hard because it's a lot of work. Like, I think what a lot of people don't realize, like, recovery is very hard. It's a lot. It disrupts your life.
Yeah.
And it's going to. And that is one thing that's really challenging about the commitment to recovery, is that you actually have to commit. It's like going to school or going to summer camp, or committing to something else. It like becomes a major time suck sometimes. And that's real. But I think one of the most, and when I was trying to juggle all of my appointments, and I'm sure at 37 years old, I mean, who knows what kind of, family commitments and other responsibilities. I mean, we all have a tremendous amount of responsibilities that we try to do. But I think the thing that remains first and foremost in my mind now still, while I have a commitment to being healthy, mind, body, and soul, is that I know that if I'm not putting in the time and prioritizing the time to take care of myself, then I'm not going to be good for anything else that I'm trying to do in my life. I mean, that just remains the bottom line. And it's taken me enough times to fall on my face in trying to do everything right and not putting myself first and my own health first. It's taken me enough times to fall on my face to realize now, like, yeah, if I don't do that, I'm not going to be good for anything else. So I hear you. And I think you're amazing for continuing to pursue this, even with as many appointments as you have and as hard of work as it is. Also, I would encourage you to, and you may have already done this, so if I'm repeating something, forgive me, but talk to a therapist or a professional that you're working with about that. Be like, I want to be here and I want to be present, but I'm so struggling with how much time this is taking up out of my life, or, trying to juggle so many things and priorities that it's becoming really hard for me. And your therapist might be able to give you some tools to be able to work on that, or maybe some ways to have fewer appointments and to do things in between time, like journaling or other meditative things or prayer or whatever it may be that might be helpful to you, where you can scale back maybe in the time you're taking to go places, but you can still be moving forward in recovery. So those are just a few thoughts that I have off the top of my head, but good for you. And I know it's hard, but I mean, bravo to you for doing the work. I mean, it's really incredible.
It's cool what you were just saying about basically slowing down and being mindful in the process too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Being present is very, very important. But it's hard and it takes practice. Because if we're not present, then especially when you're going to a nutritionist appointment, or you're going to a therapist's office, which is hard too, because then it's like, you only have 45 minutes or however long you have. And you're thinking, okay, when is the time going to be up, and how I got to make sure I get in all my stuff, whatever. Right. What was really helpful to me was, and still is, because I still have a therapist and I love her. She's absolutely unbelievable. We just talk through everything. Is I write down what I want to talk about before I go in, and I take some notes so that I go in knowing, okay, these are some of the things that I want to talk about. That usually helps me feel a little less preoccupied and a little more present in the moment when I'm there with her. But also, I think presence comes along with acceptance as well, in that there's a lot that we feel like we want to accomplish. And so often we're living either in the past, like, oh, I didn't do this, or I got to remember to do this, or we're living in the future. Whereas, okay, I got to be on time for this next thing, and this thing's coming up, and I look at my calendar on a Thursday, I have X, Y, or Z. So we have to sometimes be present and accept the fact that, yeah, I might not be able to finish all those things I wanted to, or I might not tie up that loose end. So what? Sometimes presence is saying, I'm going to accept my failures in the past or my failures potentially in the future and focus on the here and now. And it's incredible how freeing that is. But yeah, being mindful in the process is really, really important. Presence is key.
Another question we've gotten from a couple of different folks is, how can you voice your evolving clarity of your value system to your friends and loved ones when you're intrigued?
Yeah. First of all, I would say my first response is to say you should protect that when you're vulnerable. Because when you are going through that discovery process, you're still very vulnerable and very raw emotionally. And not everyone is safe to share it with. Even some very close family members. You never know the reaction or response you're going to get because you are changing. You are not, which is why obviously we have to use the word recovery. I mean, that's whatever, everyone knows what that is. But really, you're not recovering to the person you were. You're discovering a new person. You are fundamentally changing from the inside out. And the reality is that that's not okay or going to be okay with everyone in your circle of friends. It's going to be scary for them. It's going to require some processing on their part. They might have adverse reactions. So I would say when you're in the process of discovering some of these, protect that. Protect some of those discoveries to begin with until you can stomach the fact that some people might not agree or might have very adverse reactions. So my first response would be to protect that. Second is then to identify people who are safe and maybe talk with a therapist or a professional or counselor or something about who might be safe to share those things with. And start the conversation by saying, hey, I'm going to be really vulnerable with you right now, and I just need you to listen. Or I just need you to support me right now. This is something I learned from relationships with males. Okay. Females are usually better, not always. I don't want to stereotype everything, but usually females are better at just listening, going, yeah, oh, totally, girl, I got you, you know? And men tend to be, whether it's a dad or a grandpa or a spouse or a guy friend or whatever, tend to be fixers. And immediately when you start to voice problem, they try to fix it or they try to offer a counterpoint or whatever. And you're like, absolutely not what I needed right now. Get away from me. So, I mean, it's just like, that's the real deal. So, usually good to, if you're going to go to that safe person and talk about some of your discoveries or talk about some of your change of values, probably good to preface it by, hey, this is what I need from you. I need you to listen. I just need your support right now. And if you don't agree or you have some problems with it, like, let's talk about it later. But first, protect yourself. Second, identify key people. And three, always preface the conversation by, what do you need out of that conversation from that person? And I would say those would be probably the best things in approaching that conversation.
Those are awesome tips on setting boundaries for people and taking care of yourself. Very cool. Another comment was that, or a question, do you think that the society we live in today and the image portrayed of what men and women should look like to be considered beautiful affects how people view themselves and their body image?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. There's actually a really great study done by Harvard, and Dr. Cynthia Bulick was a big part of it, and of course, this is available online at the National Eating Disorders Association website and among others. But the basic premise is that they went to Fiji. They did a survey of body image, of eating disorder behaviors, and thoughts of women about their bodies. And they were essentially very positive, little to no incidence of negative or poor body image or eating disorder behaviors. They introduced Western media, came back 5 years later, and reported eating disorder behaviors, body dissatisfaction, increased depression and anxiety, all kinds of negative effects after the introduction of Western media. So it absolutely has an effect. And not only does it have an effect, but also it's so hard to escape from. I mean, you can barely drive down the road. I remember when I lived in Los Angeles, there was this, there's billboards everywhere in LA, but there's this one street, La Cienega Boulevard, driving toward the mall. And you're on this road for and that part of LA is pretty flat. So you can see like 3-4 miles down the road. And there was this huge 6-story billboard of like a half naked model in an extremely sexual position. and you literally have to stare at it for 3 miles because you have to look where you're going in the car, and it's 6 stories tall. So you really don't have an option, you know? And I'm like, this is so cruel. Like, you can't escape it, even if you're trying to. So the only remedy there is to, one, consistently preach to yourself what you know to be true about bodies and about your body. And every time you see a message, it's like what a lot of guys are counseled to do when they are struggling with pornography addiction or things like that, to bounce their eyes. And immediately, as soon as they see an image or whatever it may be that's triggering for them in regard to sex or porn addiction, to be able to bounce their thoughts to what is the true thought there, right? So whenever we see a diet message or whatever may be triggering for you related to the culture, to be able to immediately replace that with the truth, to bounce your thoughts. And that imagery, I think, was always really helpful for me, to be like, as soon as I see a diet thing on a magazine cover, like eat this food, or this, diet will get you bikini ready by summer, or whatever kind of thing, be like, okay, I know they're just trying to sell magazines, and I know that there's no diet that you can do that will actually lead to long-term health that will also get you skinny by summer. And also, I know that my worth is not valued by how I look in a bikini, and I don't even really like wearing bikinis because they're not very comfortable. So like immediately filling my head with truths I know about that they're really, really not. So that can be extremely helpful. So preaching to yourself. And then the second thing is just, I always say this, like if you're going to go on any diet, go on a media diet. I mean, we have to start putting boundaries on how much media we consume. Like I said, it can be used for great good. It can be used for great evil. But as much as we can distance ourselves from the media we consume and take time in nature, or take time with people, etc., the better and healthier we'll be.
Well said, Kirsten Haglund. Thank you so much. It's so fun to listen to you. You're like a joy bomb.
Well, thanks. You know who else is a joy bomb? I always
I know who's coming. I know.
Oh, yes. My little nugget.
Oh,
she's my joy. She's my joy bomb. We're buddies. So she wants to say hi to everyone on Facebook Live, and thank you for joining us. We appreciate you very much. Blowing a kiss.
Oh, that is a nice kiss. And that is so meaningful because so many of us that are in recovery have animals that are such a part of our recovery journey. I used to say my own eating disorder recovery, my longest relationship was with my golden retriever.
It's so true. It's so, so true. They love unconditionally, and they don't care what you look like or how much you weigh or whether you're wearing makeup or not. They just love you just the way you are. We could learn a lot from them.
Yep. Animals stay true to their values. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please let us know at Eating Disorder Hope or Timberline Knolls any topics that you'd like to see Kirsten present about in the future. We'd be welcome to give those consideration.
All right. Thanks, guys. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.